I'm going to talk about the Victorian curriculum for Oxford Science. So Oxford Science produced the Australian curriculum version just this year. So the Victorian curriculum will be out. It will be out in July and August for 7 to 10. So we'll be well on track to have them available in the classroom. Before I start, I wanted to mention how my name came to be on these books. When Oxford approached a number of schools and teachers asking what we wanted in textbooks and what frustrated us with textbooks, I sat down with them just like a lot of other teachers and expressed my frustration that the textbooks are so hard to use. They're really hard to use, especially when that year for the previous 2 years I had 2 grad teachers. For one year, one the next. I had teachers who had been teaching only in senior school and coming back to teach in the year 7 for the first time in about 10 years. And they were asking what they had to teach and how it fitted in and what level and all those sorts of things. And my frustration was that a lot of the textbooks being so hard to use, you didn't know what to teach. And these new teachers, you are having to almost sit down and go through a series of lesson plans and how much detail to go into. So that's where this came about, is that we got talking about how textbooks could be easier to use for us, but also if they're easier to use for us, then it's easier for the students. Because if we have trouble, or the teachers have trouble working out where things are and what order and how much depth to go into, the students have the same problem. So that's where this started from. When trying to talk about or think about what to talk about in these sessions, one of the things that came to mind was how much teaching has changed and how quickly it's changing. Instead of changing about every 10 years, having the new pedagogy, it seems like it's happening every 2 years now. We've had the 5 E's, which in reality was about 3 years ago. We were still talking about the 5 E's. Constructionism has been around for quite a long time. One of the big things that we see quite a lot in the literature at the moment is the growth mindset versus the fixed mindset. We had the Australian curriculum come in, and now with about 12 months warning, we get the Victorian curriculum as well. And it feels like it's really hard to keep up to date. So I'm going to run through briefly all these and then tie that in with the latest ideas and theories. So I'm going to tie that all in with John Hattie, and I'll show you how it all fits. So just a reminder of what all these are. The 5 E's, there was the engage, which is they're trying to find out what interests the students, trying to get that wow question to get their interest, to say this is going to be a good unit. Then you'd explore whatever it was that you used to get their interest. You'd start covering some of the concepts in the explain part of it. Then you would give them the chance to elaborate and develop those ideas and see the limitations of those ideas before you do the evaluation of both teacher and student, the feedback. So that was the 5 E's, which is still around but is not as prominent at the moment. And then there's Constructionism, which has been around for quite a long time, where the students learn by doing. Now, it's not you start them out with absolutely nothing and they've got to build up the whole ideas. Instead, it's you're trying to find their common interests, a bit like the engage, find their common interests, but also they give some direction to where the learning is going to go from those base concepts. So they provide some of the examples, and you give them the chance to explore those examples. So the traditional one is that you will give them projects and themes, and through that they'll develop the skills and the facts. Whereas Constructionism is you give them the skills and the facts, you give them the themes, and together you will develop a project with them. The growth mindset, which is the really thing that we're seeing quite a lot at the moment, taking into account neuroplasticity and how the brain memory works, so how you get your neurons connecting and developing stronger connections. It's dedication and hard work, so it's the case of, I can't do it now, but I know if I work hard enough and have a bit of practice, I know I'll get there. I've just got to spend some time at it, which is different to the fixed mindset that says, oh, science is not my subject, I'm more a humanities person. And we see that quite a lot, and we even see teachers promoting that idea occasionally. The growth mindset is not just about how hard you work though, it's about developing the thinking skills. So it's not just doing something in a repetitious manner, it's developing the skills for thinking and how knowing that if you keep working at it, you'll develop those thinking skills. Now, we've had the Australian curriculum now for about 4 years. We've got the Victorian curriculum coming in next year. I'm going to look at some of the differences, just touch on some of the differences between them. What they both have in common though is they're both inquiry-based learning. Now, inquiry-based learning isn't just you throw the projects at the students and they will develop up the skills. You've got to have that key concept development with them as well. One of the key differences that you notice straight away when you're looking at the Australian curriculum versus the Victorian curriculum, the Australian curriculum has 3 strands: science understanding, which is your content knowledge, your science as a human endeavour, which is applying it in the real life, and then the science inquiry skills. Where it's different in the Victorian curriculum is we have the science as a human endeavour has been tucked into science understanding. So instead of just science understanding being biology, chemistry, physics, earth and space sciences, it is biology, chemistry, physics, earth and space sciences, science as a human endeavour. Doesn't mean that you teach it as a separate thing. It's still supposed to be integrated all in there together, but they wanted to make sure that it was just as important and not just a forgotten strand. So it's designed to be fully integrated. What's also interesting is instead of being given a broad range of science as a human endeavour as you are in the Australian curriculum, they've selected out key ones that they think are important and apply most to in the Victorian curriculum, and they're the ones that they're expecting that most schools will apply. Then of course there's John Hattie. John Hattie, I know, has put quite a few of us teachers offside by saying that class size does not matter. And that's not what he said at all. What he says is that things matter more than class size. So class size still matters, but not as much as some of the other things. And he produced this big grid. Has anyone seen this before? Yeah, a few people. So this big grid, I'm not going to go through all of them because it goes on forever and he's expanding it again recently. But this is the level of how much of an impact things have. So right up the top of the list, self-reporting grades. That's the thing that has the biggest impact on your students' learning. And that can be as simple as when students, the day before something's due in, you give them the marking scheme and tell them to mark themselves. How many marks would they give themselves for this? So it teaches them to read the criteria really carefully. And I like to do it the day before because then they've got one more day to fix it up, to add that little bit more in there. But that has a huge impact on their learning and the quality of their work. The other one that I particularly like is the formative feedback. Formative feedback is the one where the students get feedback before something's due. So it's not the marking, it's the feedback on how they're going so far. So whether it's a couple of little quizzes or other manners. So some of the ways I use this, the formative evaluation is, I use it particularly at my senior school, Year 12 biology. I have, in my PowerPoint, I have exam questions. So there might be multiple choice. And it's not because I want to test them, this is the formative feedback. So I have a multiple choice question. I put it up on the board and I say, okay, discuss the question with your next door neighbour. And when you agree on which answer it is, bump fists. When they bump fists, I know they've made a decision, and everyone must bump a fist. Because too often it's a case of, well, I think it's this, but I'm not going to say anything out aloud just in case. They actually have to make a decision. When everyone's bumped fists, I will put the answer up. And if they get it right, high five each other. Now, high five is reinforcement that yes, they're doing okay. And it's, for me, it's instant feedback. I can look around who's high-fiving each other and who's got it, who hasn't. So I get that feedback as well, or whether I need to spend some more time on that topic. But that doesn't count towards their marks. They never tell me how quickly they're getting, how easily they're getting it, but I could get that little feedback as a class overall, and they get the formative feedback, yes, I'm on the right track for understanding it. That formative feedback is really important. Having that regularly works well. There's the micro-teaching, which is teaching in small sections. There's acceleration, so giving them the chance to move on if they want to. There's a whole series of others. One of the others that I really like, teacher clarity. So how clearly you explain the concept. And that's something that there's the little tricks that can help with that. And I'll come back to those in a moment. If a teacher's not perceived as being credible, the students turn off. They have to trust that you are organised, appear highly organised in presentation of the matter. You have to earn trust by showing trust to them. That's something that we know as teachers anyway. A powerful style of speaking. So I certainly remember one of the teachers when I was at school would say okay at the end of every sentence. I catch myself out doing it sometimes. And reducing distance between teachers by not standing behind lecterns and anything else. So it's just making sure that you're thinking about what you're doing and you're developing that relationship with students. We all know teachers and students rely on those relationships. That's what we are good at as teachers. So Hattie has taken all of his research, and it's all research-based, and he's condensed it down into 4 key things of being an effective teacher. And these are really useful to revise. Some of them we did in our teachers course, but it doesn't hurt to remind yourself of them sometimes, and I've done this. I've sat in on graduate teachers' classes and heard some of their little things that they had developed through their teaching course and thought, that's right, I'd forgotten that one, and go back to using it again. So let's go through those 4. The first one is prior achievement. So you need to know your students, you need to know what they're capable of, you need to know who might have trouble understanding or breaking big tasks down into little ones. You've got to know which student that you need to stop by after setting work and say, did you get that? What are you going to go on to next? Those who have the auditory processing problems, for example. If they have auditory processing problems, you must stop by them. Once you've done your bit of talk, you set up the work, everyone started working, you stop by as soon as you finish talking so that they are on task. Otherwise, they're going to get distracted. And we all know that you don't have exactly the same type of student in each class. You can have those that struggle academically, low literacy levels, the auditory processing problems. You know they're the ones you stop off at. You know that there's going to be a couple in the class that are going to be hard workers no matter what. You have to make sure that you stop off from them, but it might not be first. And then you've got those that are frustrating. Those who do really, really well sometimes, and then they completely bomb out in other times because they're not interested in the topic. And that's the fixed mindset. That I prefer more the biology subject than the physics subject. We see that all the time. So you have to know your students well enough to pick which ones you need to catch up with. And sometimes that might take a little while to get to know. It also means we need to differentiate the curriculum. So when we're differentiating which ones we need to extend, we need to have the variety of the resources. We need to give them that open-ended learning, compared to those who need that high level of scaffolding to break the big tasks up into the little ones. We need to make sure that we direct them to the resources rather than just general words. And then, of course, we've got those in the middle. So we need to differentiate our curriculum as well. All of which is knowing about our students. So that's the first thing for being a teacher. Then we need to, for the second thing that John Hattie says, is we need to target the learning. And target the learning is the learning intentions. So in other words, the kids have to know what it is that they need to learn. And that can sometimes be really difficult because often we're running from one class to the next. And if you're running from one class to the next, you're not spending that time when you're rushing into the classroom, you dump your books down at the front and you say, right, I'm going to be teaching, that's right, centrifuging and filtering today. So, right, centrifuging and filtering is. But centrifuging and filtering is not really what we're supposed to be teaching them. We're teaching them about mixtures. We're teaching them about separating the mixtures, and we use centrifuging and filtering to do it. So one of the things that I've taught myself recently, particularly in the last 12 months, is spending that 30 seconds before you step into the classroom thinking, now what do I want the students to know or be able to do when they walk out the door? If you make that decision before you step into the classroom, then you will go back to that, you'll revisit that key concept or that key skill at least 3 times in the class. And the kids will walk out of the classroom saying that class was about, and you'll get there. They also need to know the success. So they need to know that, right, if I know this or I can do this, then I will have succeeded in this lesson. They need to have that formative feedback every single lesson, that this is what they've achieved. Part of the problem is, often we're so busy trying to impart the information or getting them to find the information, well, we don't realise that 90% of what we're teaching they already know. We just have to gather it up into the right terminology for them. We need to have that high expectations, and we need to have that conceptual understanding. Having student teachers come into my classroom and having to explain again centrifuging and filtering, as they think that centrifuging and filtering is what they have to teach, because they're not given the conceptual understanding that they really need to be given. It's one of the frustrations with student teachers. They're not actually taught general science, they're taught the specialty areas. So just to give you an example of it, so I went for a walk through Ikea while I was thinking about this talk and took a series of pictures. And it brought to mind what we're trying to do with students. Often we're giving them lots of information and we're hoping that they're going to get there. But until we tell them what they're supposed to be looking for, they don't know it. These 3 slides are all about bookcases, because I was looking for bookcases. You don't notice because it wasn't immediately obvious. Whereas if I had said at the start, we're going to talk about bookcases, you'll notice the bookcases. And that's what learning intentions are. The students are more likely to see what's important if we tell them from the start, this is important. In fact, you can increase student achievement 27% if the students know what they're looking for. That's 1/3. That's huge. And we have to be explicit with it. Again, centrifuging and filtering. This is the concept. It's not that. This is the concept. But how many times do we actually teach this? Until recently, even I wasn't. So that was the first 2 for John Hattie. The first one was knowing our students. The second one is being explicit in our teaching. The third one is the curriculum should progress. And the students should see how it progresses. We should know how it progresses. We need to know what's in Year 7 and how that flows through to Year 8, Year 9 and Year 10. And not everyone reads the curriculum documentation from VCAR as thoroughly as they should. It does state it there, but often we don't get time to do it. So we need to make sure that the skills and the challenges are increasing through the year levels as well. You have to, what we do is we look at VCE level and we deconstruct it. so that we know what has to be at all the year levels. How do the concepts in each area relate to each other? Progress, and you need to know it across the areas. One of the classic ones is ecosystems. Ecosystems, energy is lost in ecosystems because you have the sunlight bringing it in, and as it moves up each trophic level, then the energy gets lost. But then that doesn't fit very nicely with physics, where energy cannot be created or destroyed. So you actually have to tie those two concepts together. Just for those who are interested, has anyone actually read the Victorian Curriculum documentation? Yeah, a couple. This is the main area that there's change in the Victorian Curriculum, so I thought I'd put this one up. So this is year 7, 8, 9 and 10. So year 7 hasn't changed a terrible lot. There's science as a human endeavour that the Victorian Curriculum wants you to put in. They've specified exactly which one they want you to put in. For year 8, energy has not changed very much. However, light and sound has come in. So light and sound is at year 9 this year. It's going to be year 8 next year, which flows on from energy. Electric circuits, instead of just light and sound being in there as one of the dot points for particle model and wave model, they've been explicit saying we want you to cover this in electric circuits, including light-dependent diodes and temperature-dependent diodes are in there. And robots, how they can apply to robots, which, just as a little hint, the vacuum cleaner that runs around on floors by themselves, they use the light-dependent diodes and temperature-dependent diodes. So that works as a really good example, because for science as a human endeavour, you have to put robots in there and how robots use the electronic components. So that's a really good one and a good excuse to get one of those little vacuum cleaners. The other thing that has been put into physics is the electromagnetism. Now, electromagnetism, I know when I saw this, I thought, because it's quite a hard concept, and I have taught it before at a year 10 level. However, at the year 10 level, there's energy flow for heat, so there's thermodynamics, and Newton's laws have come out, but we've still got acceleration, velocity, and displacement. But electromagnetism didn't fit with those. So after umming and ahhing, it really has to go after electricity, but I've put this at the end of the book. Now that's the other thing that I haven't mentioned with the Oxford Science. They're designed for you to teach from start to finish. So one of my frustrations with textbooks is that B, biology is at the start, C, chemistry comes next, E, earth and space sciences, P for physics comes last. It's not designed that way. It's because the kids come in year 7, they've never used a textbook before. And if they've never used a textbook and you give them this book, and by the way, we're starting at chapter 4, then we're going to go back to chapter 2, and then we're going to go to chapter 8, and the kids don't know how to use a textbook. It makes far more sense for year 7, they learn the skills, and then they do, from next year, I'll put the particle model in next. Yes, because it seems silly teaching mixtures without the particle model. But the trouble is the states, Queensland, WA and South Australia, year 7 was still in primary schools, and the primary school teachers didn't know it. So that's why they put the particle model in year 8 initially. But now South Australia is the only one that doesn't have year 7 in a secondary school, so they're the ones that are holding out. But if we have the choice, particle model comes before. So year 7, introduction of how to do science. Then you have the particle model, then you have mixtures, then you have water, then you have resources, and that's that nice little flow through that works. Also, being head of science, I'm very aware that you can't teach chemistry in year 7, 8, 9 and 10 all at once, because you don't have enough chemistry equipment, or you can't do the same for physics because you don't have enough physics equipment. So the way the books are designed is that chemistry is taught at different parts of the year for each of the year levels. Physics is taught at different parts of the year for all these year levels. How I got onto that was that I've put this at the end of year 9, because at the beginning of year 9 they're not ready for it yet. It doesn't fit into year 10, but it fits beautifully in the flow through of the year 9 book, that this is the last topic that you teach in year 9 just as they're about to go into year 10. It makes sense. And physics in year 9 is not taught at the end of the year in any of the other books. So it's been planned that way deliberately. So that's one of the main changes, is that we've got light and sound in year 8, we've got electromagnetism in year 9, we've got thermodynamics in year 10. With the thermodynamics, I've actually looked at, it's a year 11 physics concept. So I've gone through the year 11 physics textbooks, I've worked out, okay, what is it that's really important for students to know, so that I'm using the right language for physics, and also what can still be of interest for students. So that's that balance between those year 10 students who aren't going to go on in physics, but it's still interesting and relevant, plus using the correct language that'll set those up who will go on. So that's the balance between those two. Okay, so the fourth thing for John Hattie was teacher collaboration. In other words, at those weekly, fortnightly, whenever meetings between all the other teachers in the year levels. And asking yourselves those big questions. What does a student really need to be successful at science? Why are we teaching? What's the basics of science? What are the key concepts in science? What are the key concepts for that particular subject that you want to make sure they get on or they understand? What are those key concepts they need to know for the following year? You actually need, as a department, to have those conversations when we're flat out for time. The other thing is that, why are we doing this assignment? We all have assignments that we've done for the last 10 years because the kids love them and they're really useful, but are they? Are they still relevant to the curriculum? Are they still relevant to the students? If they are, great, keep them. But if they aren't, then maybe consider finding something new and update it. So having those conversations are really, really useful. So the 4 things from John Hattie is: know your students' prior achievements. This is the learning tensions, isn't it? Clearly express your learning intentions and success criteria. The curriculum should progress and the teacher collaboration, and this is what you feel like at the end of it. I don't know about you guys, but our preparation time has been decreasing. Are you noticing that? We're getting less and less time to actually prepare the lessons. Which is, again, brings me back to what I was talking about Oxford 2 years ago, saying that we need something to make our lives a bit easier. We need, really, lesson plans. So, and this, I wasn't the only one saying it, that the current textbooks were often too long, too much content that we never get through, too complicated, literacy levels sometimes too high, because you always got to have the extension stuff in there as well, but the kids don't know that it's extension stuff, so they think they have to know it. Difficult for teachers to find, and students, because remember, if we have trouble, they have trouble, to find their way around it. And it wasn't very organised, particularly for those year 7 students. So we sat down and we discussed, okay, what would a good textbook? So starting from scratch was really, really interesting. Needed to keep the animations and models, and it needed to have those pictures that would motivate the students. Needed to tie all the lab activities and everything together so that the kids would know the topics, the concepts, and the pracs. That's why you're doing the prac, because it relates directly to that one. You needed to have skill builders, you need to have real life, and you need to make sure it's not too heavy, because they've got enough textbooks. Need to make sure that it supported differentiation. Got to have good layout, and got to give us the good support material. We need the support material. Differentiation can be differentiate either the content with the skills or with what they produce at the end. So there's different ways that you can differentiate. Remember, there are 3 different students. You can differentiate at 3 different points. So this was the result. This is the way it's set out. Now, I don't know whether you've managed to have a look at the samples of them, but this is one opening, one double-page spread, one concept, about one lesson. That's what it is. This is the learning intention. The students learn from scratch that this is the main thing they need to know. The other thing that's different, and I got this idea from one of my daughter's textbooks. One of my daughters at university, her second year nursing textbook, had the summary at the start rather than at the finish. Which makes sense when you think about it, because if the students read through of what's important, then when they read through the detail, they're going to pick up, okay, that's what I should be aware of. That's where it comes from. So we have the key concept, we have a summary of the concept, we have the explanation of the concept, and we have questions that relate to it. So rather than we're trying to fit through the lesson and, okay, we've covered this, what's the homework? Okay, flick through to all the questions all at once. Okay, this question here, we've covered enough of that one. No, you can't do that one yet because we haven't covered enough of that. These questions only relate to that. So I can do, and I've been doing it this year, it's really good. We do that concept, we do it in that lesson. Okay, do the homework questions for 4.1. It's done. It makes me appear really organised, which means the students trust that I know what I'm doing. And they get the conceptual learning. So they have the learning intentions and therefore they've got that greater chance of success. And it is making a difference. I'm seeing the difference in the classroom. The other thing that you can't quite see up in the top corner is up here, there's the pracs that relate. Almost every single lesson has an experiment that relates to that concept. All the experiments are in the back of the book. So the students know that, okay, 4.1, I'm going to be doing the experiment for 4.1, flick through to the end of the book, experiment 4.1. So that's what they do, and it's all tied in there together. It also makes it really, really easy because if I'm ordering pracs, and we know we have to order our pracs 3 days in front, then I can just flick through in the book to that opening. I can read up, okay, experiment 4.1 on page this from this textbook, and I can put that into the ordering system and I'm done. So, which makes it really useful and much easier to plan, and I can just flick through each opening, one lesson, so I can order the experiment for each one. Up the very front of each chapter is all the concepts. So when you're summarising at the end for tests, you can get the students to go through and even just write a summary for each one of those. What do they mean? And they can see that conceptual flow through that's really important. The what ifs is also something else that I find particularly important, for those who have to teach at a VCE level. If you teach at a VCE level at year 11 and year 12, you've now got to get them to do inquiry-based learning. So in other words, they've got to design their own experiment. At the very start of every single chapter, there's the what ifs, where they'll be given a little procedure that they need to go through. And once they've done it once, then you start asking, what can we change? Now, the way I illustrate this one best is we mix bicarbonate vinegar. So we have a little plastic cup and I say, put in a bit of vinegar, put it up to that mark and put a little permanent marker at the top of it. Then add some bicarb, and what's going to happen? It's going to froth up. Put a mark how much it froths up. Once you've put that mark how much it froths up, we clean everything out. Now do exactly the same, get it to go up to exactly the same mark. And you've got to get it to go up to exactly the same mark 3 times. Then you've got a reproducible test. Once you've got a reproducible test, then you say, well, what can you change? What if I add more vinegar? What if I add more bicarb? What if I heat up the vinegar? What if I add brown vinegar? What if I have expensive vinegar versus cheap vinegar? All of a sudden you've got an experiment. Now that technique is that you can actually use at year 12. I'm a biology teacher. So at year 12 next year, enzymes, we're all going to do that experiment. That's probably what we're all going to play with. I'm going to give them some pineapple juice and say, you can test pH this way. You can test temperature this way. Find what temperature and pH it works best at. And all they'll need to do is, what if I increase pH? What if I decrease pH? What if I increase temperature by incremental amounts? They use that same what if technique for all of them. So the what ifs are actually based right through all 4 books. So the students get used to designing their own experiments right from year 7. And that's going to be really important for by the time they get to year 12, they get it. Of course, there's always the standard at the end of every chapter. You've got your revision questions, which are based according to Bloom's taxonomy. So they have a chance, high expectations, they know. The other thing that I like is these research questions. If you've got your really bright students in the class and the homework questions are based on concepts, you say, don't do the homework questions for the next couple of times. Do this instead. You're differentiating all of a sudden. You can see, now this is based around the Australian curriculum one, not the Victorian curriculum one, because I don't have the particle model in there. I can tell straight away. But this was, Oxford produced this as a poster, which is great. You can see the concepts and how they progress right through, from start to finish. And you can see it flows where we've got the introduction, particle model will come in there, then we've got the mixtures, we've got the water, we've got the resources. It flows. They learn kinetic theory before they do kinetic or use kinetic energy in the chemistry. So they have all that understanding. Of course, there's the digital resources as well, which is available on any device. You can use on any computer or any tablet. I particularly like the teacher ones where we have teacher notes with all the answers. We have literacy support too. These special ed teachers here requested, when I first started talking about this project, that we have some literacy background for some students, particularly in year 7. So we've started doing some of those. There are videos in there as well. So some of the key experiments, I did some videos to show how to dissect a fish, for example, or squid. All of that helps. There's also the Testbank that you can set up for students beforehand, so you can have before and after knowledge. You can set, if you have your students and their emails, you can all be hooked into a class and you can preset for individual students. So you can differentiate to find their prior knowledge and afterwards. And those results auto-correct, so it doesn't mean you have to correct, and the results get sent through to you. And you can assign them to individuals or classes. Again, John Hattie, you're appearing really organised. So you're a trustworthy teacher. You can see this is the results you get. You can set the worksheets electronically, so you can set them for homework, so they can just log on and get it, or you can print them off. Don't forget, you can still print them off and do it the traditional way. Test banks, so you can design tests that's based around the curriculum. And one of the things I particularly like about this, so these are the types of tests that you can set. And I think it's the next one. They're reusable, so if one of your teachers in one year level sets a test, then they can pass it on to someone else, so that the whole year level will teach the same thing. And every single test question is aligned to the Victorian curriculum, which makes reporting easier. Teaching support notes, which is really important. So the risk assessments are there that are prepared by our lab tech here. She is fabulous, the best I have ever worked with. She even went to the detail of adding in the recipes for your own lab techs. So your own lab techs do not have to hunt up all the originals or the dilutions or how the risk assessments for the lab techs themselves, so they can make use of them. So it's one way of keeping your lab techs really happy, which is, we all know that is what makes our life much easier. Now, with these books, they're all going to be printed in time, because I know that that's one of our concerns, that when you start, particularly when they're only given 12 months to produce for the whole new curriculum, it's been, I know, a worry that whether they'll be ready in time, but you can see Year 7 and 8 in July will be ready, 9 and 10 will be ready in September. So they'll be well and truly ready for the start of the school year, even if you're like us and we start in November. You can see the prices. Now, what's also important with this, you can have the digital only, but the other thing with the digital is that the digital can be passed on when you on-sell the book. So the students do not have to buy a whole new one. So, what was that? I thought I had that written on there, but I didn't. So if the students buy the textbook and the free O book, they sell it on the following year, that digital does not cost anything extra. That goes with the book for the life of the edition. And that is actually really important. There's also the teacher version of the book that you can buy individually if you don't have a book listed. However, it's book listed, then that's available. So if you want to know any more information, then you can talk to the salespeople who know all the fine detail, or if you want them to come out to your school and when you're making your choices, because we all have to make our choices at the end of this year or whenever your book list is. For us, it's the end of term 3. Our book list have to be in. So if you need someone to come out and talk, then you're quite willing to do that. And that's the one they sort of wanted to put up at the end of it. Just all my little bits and pieces that I do. So if you've got any questions, please just ask. Has anyone got any questions that you're willing?
An activity book for students as well?
It has worksheets. So each opening has one worksheet that you can print out or you can set electronically. So yes, there's worksheets for every single opening.